Good afternoon and welcome to the City Council informational meeting. The meeting will start in 60 seconds.
Good afternoon. Welcome to our City Council informational meeting. Today's date, Wednesday, November 12th. Great to see everybody here. Yes, it is Wednesday. It's not Tuesday. Councilor Kiley sitting by himself. He's not being ostracized. He's just sitting by himself today. I will begin our meeting with our staff report, and Lori Hogstad, City Clerk. Please, Lori.
All right, there we go. Thank you. Lori Hogstad, City Clerk. I thought it would behoove us to take a look at the calendar for the rest of the year with the holidays coming up and just review the meetings that we have canceled and those that we still have that we will be holding, just to review for the rest of the year. So November, next Tuesday, November 18th, we have canceled the 4 o'clock informational and canceled the 4:30 or approximately land use committee meeting. We will have a 7 o'clock city council meeting. Right now it's looking like there won't be too many items on there. I believe I have 2 right now, and then I will have some planning first readings, so it'll be a pretty short meeting at this time. And when I say 2, I mean on the regular agenda. So it should be a pretty short agenda. And then for the following week, November 25th, we have canceled the meetings for that day, including the informational Joint City Minnehaha County and Joint City Lincoln County. That would be Thanksgiving week. And then December 2nd, we have all meetings as planned. And of course, fiscal is always dependent upon whether we have any items to discuss. December 9th, as planned, of course, public services if we have items. December 16th, we will have the informational. The land use has been canceled, and we will have, of course, our 7 p.m. meeting, and that will be the last meeting of the year for 2014. December 23rd, obviously, the week of Christmas, we will not have a joint city Minnehaha County or Lincoln County meeting. The 4 o'clock informational is still on the books, and I thought if we wanted to cancel that, we can. There is nothing scheduled or requested to be presented at that meeting. And the same with December 30th. That would be our 5th Tuesday, and at this time, there are no requests for any items on those 2 meetings.
Yeah. Lori, our 5th Tuesday, typically we don't have an informational meeting,
right?
Correct? I'd say unless the council objects, let's wipe that one off. Let's keep the 23rd open for now, just in case. And
just see if anything comes in.
Jameson?
I think we'd be better served to cancel it now versus try to plan for it. I think we've done that in the past. And
the 23rd?
Yeah, I mean, if...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't see any objections, yeah. So it is an informational meeting, so... We will wipe that one off the slate then,
We'll cancel it, and if someone does call with an urgent need, I can let you know, and we can see what we can do. But generally, we do cancel those 2 meetings just because it's hard to get many people are gone and so on. So, okay.
Yep.
I will do that, and then I will send you an updated schedule so you'll be able to follow along exactly what we have. And one other quick item, I just wanted to note that on Tuesday, November 4th, Election Day, I did go to visit some of the precincts just to get some ideas for us for an additional vote center or 2 or 3, however many we may be looking at. I went to 2 locations in northern Sioux Falls. That's a tough area to find anything. I did go to Fire Station 7, and I can see why that's not, I don't believe that would suit our needs at all. The other one I looked at was the Career Technical building out on the southeast campus, and that was actually very, very nice location, the Career Technical Education Center. So that might be something to look at if we're looking anywhere in the northern part of Sioux Falls. Southern, I did visit 2 locations in Minnehaha County. and 4 locations in Lincoln County within the city limits. We have some really great options in that area that I think we can maybe take a look at. Of course, we'll have to make sure they're ADA compliant. And what I thought I would do is pick the couple that I think might work the best as far as location and put together a preliminary map. And in the meantime, do some more checking on ADA requirements and so on, and then present those to you at a future meeting.
Questions for Lori? Councilor Staggers?
Yes, Lori, in the future, are we going to continue with the voting like we did this last election, or?
The precincts, no. Our plan is to always continue and move forward with the vote centers.
Because, you know, I was at one of those precincts, and, you know, one individual in particular, where am I supposed to be? I mean, they were very frustrated, and a lot of people were looking around, where am I supposed to go? And, I mean, vote centers is fine if we just constantly do vote centers, but switching back and forth is just...
It's tough, I know, and the school has likes the vote center concept. We really like the vote center concept. The county is just, or county commission as it may be, is just not ready to take that plunge yet, but I'm hoping that at some point we will all operate the same way, using the same vote locations and using the e-poll books.
Because, once again, people are a little upset.
Councilor Erpenbach?
Well, I just would remind all of us that we're headed for the future, that just because Minnehaha County hasn't made that change doesn't mean that we should step back, that we really are at a point where people want to vote, want to be able to vote at any location that's open, and that's what a vote center is an open location to vote. No matter where you live within the voting area, you can vote at that location. It makes it way easier. What happens is the confusion happens when we require people to only go to one place. We let them go 10, 12 places in the spring. It's a huge difference. Much more convenient. That's where we're headed.
How many voting precincts are there that the county has to staff?
I believe they had 71
71,
for
okay,
this
that's the number I
past
thought I
election.
heard.
We had 13 vote centers, and maybe in 16 we'll have 15 or 16 vote centers. Just, we'll take a look and see what we need. So yeah, that's a lot to
15
staff.
to 71 is a huge step, and we here get it. We know that this is a municipal election versus one that is state or national, and they're run differently, but I don't think most of the voting people pay that close of attention. Oh, I got to go vote. Well, they think they can go to the same place every time, and I know we are confusing people, and if money wasn't an object, I think I'd probably side with Councilor Staggers and say we need to, 71 voting centers. How much would that increase our budget for elections by going from 15 to 71? It would be huge.
It would. Right now we hire about just under 150, which includes absentee and some of the workers that we need at the county. And I know Bob, Auditor Litz, for this election hired over 500. So that's a lot of people. And then not just the people, but the supplies, and it would really add up quickly.
Staffing,
Staffing, supplies.
That they're all reserved and everybody knows, and
Right.
So it is a tough situation, and hopefully we are going the right direction. We are, like Councilor Erpenbach said, the future of it, and we can get the others to come along with us. So
I know that Auditor Litz is going to give a report, or there'll be some questions at the next joint meeting next Tuesday. And I'm not sure where that will go from there, but I'll be interested to hear his report or the questions asked, and kind of where the discussion leads. So,
other concerns or comments? Councilor Kyler.
I just would like to reiterate that I do believe in the vote centers that the city has adopted, and that this past election, the election this past week was that was not our decision to make. That's not the city's decision to make. That was the county's, and so hopefully they can move in the same direction that the city and the school district has gone.
right.
Thank you. Councilor Erpenbach?
Just one more question about scheduling. You said that we were going to have a report from Auditor Litz the next time we meet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant he's going to report to his county commission.
His county commission.
Yes,
Thank
to
you.
his county commission next Tuesday. And so I'll listen to that or attend that and see where they're going with that.
All righty. Thank you, Lori.
Yep.
Jim David, Legislative and Operations Manager. I believe we have our final proposed draft of our legislative priorities.
Good afternoon, Jim David, City Council staff. In July, the City Council approved 7 provisional legislative priorities. This was a departure from previous practice. The council wanted to get in front of the South Dakota Municipal League Conference in October and the approval of their legislative platform, which was their statement of policy. Sioux Falls was successful in adding 2 items to the Municipal League statement of policy. They were the affordable housing and also the Lewis and Clark funding. Following this conference, the council and administration were solicited for potential changes to the provisional draft, which you see in front of you right now. This right here is just the way it stands. We did hear back from Public Works. They wanted some clarification on number 7, instead of saying general fund, omnibus water fund. There was also discussion. There was some feedback from council regarding 3 other items. The first one is just an opposition. This is actually taken directly from the Municipal League's statement of policy. This opposes restrictions to TIF. This came out of the Association of County Commissioners, and they are proposing a revised TIF structure that would require a municipality to get county approval before the county or before the city can use their levy within the TIF. If the county denies their portion of their levy, then the city can still continue to do the TIF, but without the county's portion of the property taxes. The second item is the third penny. It supports a third penny municipal local tax. It would be used for infrastructure. It would have to be approved by the public, and it would have a sunset period. Once the infrastructure is paid off, then the third penny drops off, and in order for it to be brought back forward, a specific project needs to be identified, and it has to be approved by the voters. The following item was added to the statement of policy. It's a bit confusing. This would change how land is valued, specifically that land that is being developed. Right now, when a piece of ag property is brought into the city, it is annexed, and then it is pre-developed. It is considered commercial or non-ag property, so the property taxes do increase significantly. This proposal is actually from the Black Hills region. It's from Rapid City also, and this would actually calls for the county and the cities to get together and develop a system that the trigger mechanism is when the land is actually developed with roads, with houses. Then the new tax levy takes effect, where it's commercial, non-ag property and ag. So, happy to entertain your questions.
Question that I have, Jim. I'm just looking at number 3, and I agree with most of it, but I'm just concerned or curious about why we put in the last sentence, expand the power to impose a sales or use tax to any other unit of government. Why the or use?
The sales tax in the state is called sales and use tax. That's how it's termed in state statute. So they're just together. That's why the sales and use is combined. This is actually from the Municipal League's statement of policy. But a sales and use tax are together. They're not 2 separate taxes in statute.
Should it say and instead of or? Mr. Chair, should it say and instead of or? So that it would.
Sure.
I don't know if it should be or just. I'd be more comfortable with just removing the use tax out of there, because there might be, Councilor Erickson.
Just with working with Department of Revenue, sales and use tax is pretty synonymous, that if somebody brings in materials from out of state and does a siding job or whatever, and sales tax was not paid on those, the siding, they would have to then remit use tax. Or if an establishment gives away free meals to their employees, they have to pay use tax on it. So it really is, if sales tax is not paid, then use tax is paid. It's just basically one and the same, that we tax about everything in our state, since we don't have the income tax. So I would say leave it in, and might be better, but I think we're splitting hairs. I don't, it's really, if you give something away, you pay use tax if sales tax was not paid up front.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other concerns? Councilor Erpenbach, yes.
Just then, looking at the three potential changes, are those ones that the council wants to consider adding to ours, or does that become too big? We've, in the past, kind of kept it to 5, and now we're up to 7. This would make 10. What's the feeling of the group on this?
Okay. Councilor Erickson?
Me again. I agree. I think that if it's, let's find what's most important to Sioux Falls. What's most important to our constituents? What's most important to moving the city forward, and focus on those. Doesn't mean that the municipal league won't still support certain legislation, but what's most important to us? So I would say keep it simple.
Well, and I guess if I could add to that, I was thinking that Yvonne Taylor, who's the executive director, knows that these things are on our minds. If she needs us to help her with something, even though we haven't passed them as part of our resolution, she would be able to jump in. I just wonder if we shouldn't just leave what we have, the 7 we have.
I agree.
Okay. Councilor Staggers?
Yeah. Jim, have you ever had an opportunity to take a look at how successful our resolutions have been in accomplishing legislation in Pierre? Because I'm not sure if the legislators really care about this.
Yeah, a couple examples. The carrier license allowing local control, that was approved during the last session, and previously, somebody correct me, the 911 surcharge was approved. Extension of the making permanent the tourism tax, I believe that was the other item. Those are just off the top of my head. Yes, some of these will not, but it's just the feeling of the council, the feeling of the city at the time.
Do we let them know about the vote that's
What's that?
taken on each of these resolutions?
If you'd like, yeah, I could run through it and just you have to remember too, some of these were never proposed, or may not have been proposed in previous sessions. But if you'd like, I could look through them and see how they were successful in the past.
Okay.
So,
Councilor Erickson?
I would say this is a very important resolution that legislators do look at. I think that it's important that we work with them, and that legislators know at the end of the day, we as a city, we as a community want the best for our constituents. And so I think it's so important to have the legislators buy in and know kind of the direction of the city, since we are here working at the city level, they're working at the state level. It's just a perfect partnership, in my opinion, to make sure that we are in communication with them. So I think that this document is very important. Some may have been tried in the past, but oftentimes in Pierre, things are tried 6 or 7 times before they finally pass by making the perfect tweak. Yeah. So,
Councilor Jameson?
Plus, I think there's some new process to the method here. We were normally just submitting these, but now we've done some other additional work. I'm not sure what that is, but maybe somebody else knows. But I'm trying to lead on the witness here. But we've changed the game a little bit, in that we're meeting directly with the Sioux Falls legislators, one-on-one, and sitting down with them and going over our list and talking about it. And if we can get one of them to take it and run with it, now we've got some leadership. And so we're working it differently than we have in the past. So hopefully there will be more success to come.
And absolutely, after our first meeting, I received many calls from legislators. Hey, do you need me to sponsor this? What can I do with this? Where can we go? Other people that maybe heard priority that didn't like it said, why are you doing this? And it opened that door to have the communication now, as opposed to saying, here, Counselor Staggers, this is what's important to me, do this. Instead, it's asking their opinion, getting their buy-in. Do you think this will work? What needs to be changed? And will you support this? And I think it's a great start in the right direction, and just the start of the process to continue for years to come.
And I think, Mr. Chair, this also provides defensive language. It provides the municipal league, their lobbyists, instructions on how to react to certain bills when they come across. So it may not be something that initially that's actually passed, but something that the municipal league does not want passed, nor does the City of Sioux Falls want passed.
We began work on this, and in the past, it never made sense to me why we waited till December to come up with our legislative priorities. So I know this has been a work in progress for us for several months, and we began on it probably back in June. So it is not being done lightly, I guess. Councilor Kiley.
Thank you. I thought I should say something just so that you guys remember that I was still down on this end. But no, I would much rather be proactive than do nothing. I'm not sure what the alternative would be to doing nothing, because otherwise it's guesswork on the part of our legislators, and I certainly don't want them guessing at what our priorities are. So I would encourage that we continue to do this.
All righty. So we will have this as a resolution to this evening, correct?
No, this does not come till December. There is a legislative meeting that's coming up tomorrow. So I will have one in early December for your consideration.
All righty. Thank you, Jim. City Council open discussion. Anybody have something they would like to bring up for the rest of the council? Councilor Staggers.
Yeah. Last Tuesday, or I should say a week ago, this last Tuesday, at the last minute, I was requested to do polling for national media. And so I'm in the precinct in southern Sioux Falls in Lincoln County. And as I was asking people different questions and things like that, the thought came across that, you know where I was at? I was in a church. And so that brought up the issue of the snowplows and the Christian artwork and things like that. So there are some people who do believe that separation of church and state is in the Constitution. If you read it, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. You might be able to interpret separation of church and state, whereas other people will disagree. There is no separation of church and state in the Constitution. But being there in a church building and that issue of the plows and separation of church and state, I thought that was kind of interesting because I haven't heard anybody lately talk about separation of church and state. We should keep voting out of churches. Personally, I think things are operating just fine, but for those individuals who are concerned about separation of church and state, they might want to take a look at that.
All righty. I have one open discussion item. About a month and a half ago now, has it been, Councilor Jamison, we did our joint work with the county. And I know that we have several people who are on committees working within the county. Do we have any liaison reports? Anybody been involved in their respective committees and doing any work? Councilor Erpenbach?
Well, funny you should ask. 7 o'clock this morning, all of us non-morning people were here working on that kind of stuff. I said the last time we met at 7 in the morning, we had to pretend we're morning people, and we put smiles on our faces and did the job. But what we're doing is and actually it's on inside Town Hall this month as well. Commissioner Jim Schmidt from Lincoln County and Commissioner Cindy Heiberger from Minnehaha County helped me kind of explain it. But the two counties and the City Council are looking at what are some ways that we can make government, metropolitan government, a little more efficient for citizens. And so our work group that Councilor Erickson and I are on, and Councilor Rolfing is too, as people from Minnehaha, people from Lincoln, and we're looking at zoning and building permit kind of stuff. We're just looking at forms and processes, and do our staffs work together? Do they call each other if things are going to affect the neighbors, that kind of stuff. So we've had 2 meetings in addition to that overall meeting, so that's our group. I don't know about the other ones.
Making good progress,
Yeah, I
I
think
hope.
so.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Any other reports? Thank you for that, Councilor Erpenbach. I know kind of at the drop of a hat there, but I appreciate it. All righty, we'll head into our presentations. First off and only is our stormwater management overview, and stormwater is not the same thing as wastewater, so make that distinction right now, because I think the wastewater one is this evening. Welcome, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you. Jeffrey Schmidt representing planning staff on this item, and I'm just going to give a quick introduction before Andy Berg gets into the main topic. Back in July, I was here to give an overview into the informational about the planning office and the Shape Sioux Falls 2035. Planning and engineering works together on the majority of our items, and drainage is just one of those items. And that's not it. There we go. Okay, so back in July, what we talked about is the comprehensive plan, which is Shape Sioux Falls. After you put a comprehensive plan together, you have the subdivision ordinance, which is directly involving between planning and engineering, the laying out of all of your lots and blocks, then the zoning ordinance, and then after you have those things done, then you really have to get into what Andy's going to be talking to today is what are your engineering design standards. The goals and objectives that we have in our comprehensive plan for the City of Sioux Falls include all these things that Andy's going to start reviewing today about how you effectively manage growth, how you look at neighborhoods, land use, how you have sustainability for your community. Again, those all go back to that comprehensive plan. So, Chapter 2 of the comprehensive plan, I just highlighted, because this was again back in July. Chapter 2 talks about how do you ensure that city utilities can be provided timely and how much growth. We have our growth areas, we know where we're going to be and how we're going to get there, but specifically we have a map that we've started using since back in 2009 and 10 that highlights, and again that's what I'm just trying to do here today, where you're going to have public facilities and detention areas. So any stakeholders, any citizens out there could come to us and look at how do you coordinate and how do you look at drainage areas, detention ponds, and drainage improvements, as well as libraries, parks, schools, bike trails. All those things are coordinated in our comprehensive plan each and every day. So the last slide that I had back in July, and part of my discussions that I always have when I go out publicly, is that we always try to plan, but very few plans come to decisions. But when you're doing those things, what you really need to do, and again, this is just a slide we always use, you look at sewer capacity, drainage basins, and then you start looking at land uses. So that's just kind of an introduction to Andy's one of those key people that we have to look at right from the very beginning because he's looking at all the drainage basins that we have in the City of Sioux Falls.
Good afternoon, Andy Berg with the Public Works Engineering Office. I'm the principal drainage engineer for the city. Our drainage team consists of 4 individuals, myself, 2 engineers, and an engineering technician. We handle many of the things that I'm going to go over today. Basically, I was asked to provide just a general overview of the stormwater management program. Stop me if you have any questions, otherwise I can answer them at the end as well. Basically, what I'd like to speak about are the stormwater program funding and responsibilities that we have with the program, standards for development, meaning the engineering design standards we use when developments come in, and then common concerns that we get from the public on a daily basis. So first, the program funding and responsibilities. Significant stormwater milestones that we've had over the years, just a brief history. 1982, the drainage fee was implemented. This is our main source of revenue for the drainage system, for the maintenance, capital improvements, those type of things that we do. That was established in 1982. In 1999, we were issued our first stormwater permit from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. This established that the city is a point source discharge and require permitting of stormwater discharges from construction sites. 2003, we adopted our master plan. This master plan laid out our regional pond system to provide detention needs and water quality needs for the growing areas of town. 2005, our sump pump collection systems were required on new developments. This was a big step in the nuisance discharge we have from sump pump collection systems. And then beginning in January of this next year, 2015, we are adding the flood control system under the realm of the drainage system because they're very related with the flows of water, outlet structures, and that type of thing, and the maintenance activities. Just a quick breakdown of the drainage fees. They fund our operation and maintenance, capital improvements in existing areas of town, and 50% of the capital improvements in the developing areas of town, with the other 50% being funded by our platting fees. Items that the Storm Fund does, this is a very popular one because it happens very frequently around town, is inlet repairs. Our stormwater inlet systems are subject to traffic loads, chemical applications in winter, snow plow damage, numerous items that are damaging to the inlets, and every year we basically go through and do repairs to those inlets as much as we can, and it's a never-ending process, but we are planning to do more and more each year. Cleaning of channels and the storm pipes, jetting out the storm pipes to avoid situations like this where we have street flooding in areas, let that water get out of the streets and into our systems as efficiently as possible. We pay for the first pass each year of the street sweeping. This helps reduce all of the siltation and chemical pollutants that go into the storm sewer system. The spring, all the residue from the remaining from the previous winter is still on the streets, so we try and get all that off in that first sweep. It's very beneficial to our water quality. Maintenance of drainage channels. You've probably seen this slide before. This is one of our drainage channels in town that was very heavily eroded, had numerous problems with tree growth, lack of maintenance because of the accessibility issues, that type of thing. This is that same channel following one of our projects. Cleaned it up, put some riprap in to prevent some of the erosion on the channel banks. Got the trees back a little farther so the grasses could grow and help hold the soils in place. This is some of the growth that we deal with. This is an outlet structure and the berm across the end of a drainage regional BMP or regional pond that we've constructed in town. We pay for the land to buy that pond and the construction and the maintenance of those regional facilities. Flood control, as I had mentioned, it will be coming under our group in 2015. This deals with maintenance of our 28 miles of levees throughout the city, as well as the 2 dams, the older dam that we have, the diversion dam up near 60th Street, and also this newer dam, the Confluence Dam, which is near the Clubhouse Suites, Johnny Carino's area, where Skunk Creek and Big Sioux meet. Vegetation management is a big part of our system. This is another picture of a regional pond. A lot of our regional ponds are actually dry when it's not raining. Pond maybe isn't a great word for it, but these areas are filled with water during a rain event and then they drain back to dry. The vegetation that we establish in these is a wetland vegetation seed mix. This isn't the greatest picture because it's towards the fall, but generally we get vegetation in there, a great mix of species that thrives with wet conditions and can be allowed to be underwater for a period of time and still grow, and also help choke out the weeds and that type of thing that tend to grow in these areas as well. Our vegetation management on all drainage ways, ponds, and regional ponds in town that we own, we have a management plan that's been established so that we're maintaining those properties consistently citywide so that everything's being done with the same intent in mind. The drainage properties, we basically mow a 12-foot wide buffer around the perimeter of each property adjacent to the neighboring residents. Then in those areas that aren't mowed, we use an aquatic safe chemical application to control weed growth in there and promote just the growth of those good grasses and natural grasses that grow in that area. Benefits of this, excuse me, include just sustainability, less use of gases and carbon footprint type things, water quality, where you get more filtering through that vegetation that's growing in there, conveyance, establishing a good root system to hold our banks in place and hold our channels in the right cross section, and then also just being responsible with the tax dollars, not spending so much on gas and personnel to be out mowing areas that aren't necessarily needing to be mowed. Here's just an exhibit of what I'm talking about with that 12-foot buffer, the adjacent home to the right, and then that 12-foot buffer that we mow, and then the remaining portion of it is left in a natural state and chemical application to control the weeds. Standards for development, going into our engineering design standards. Probably the biggest question we get asked is a very confusing term, the 100-year storm event. 100-year storm event, a better name for it is 1% chance event. Basically what a 100-year storm event means is a 1% chance of the storm of that intensity occurring in any given year. Similarly, the 5-year event, which is our minor storm event in the in the design standards, has a 20% chance of occurring in any given year. Looking at the design standards, some of the things that we require, when developers come in with the plan, we require them to design the drainage systems in their development for both a minor and major event, the 5 and 100-year events. The storm sewer inlets and pipes are in place to control and collect that 5-year event with minimal street flooding. And then in a 100-year event, when those systems are inundated, having a controlled overland flow path identified so that the water can safely get out of the streets and into a channel, pond, or river safely without affecting properties. Here's a good example. Out in front where you can't see, the street has a low point with some inlets, and when that fills and can't take any more in the inlets, we look for these areas, these identified overland flow paths where you've got a swale created between the homes and a drainage easement going through there where that water can escape before it would ever get deep enough to go to one of the adjacent houses. One of the questions we've also received is the effects of the climate in these past few years. It seems like we've had much more high-intensity storm events, and should we be looking at changing our design standards? We looked into this, and I've got a table here that briefly explains 1961, the standard that we actually use, has those inches per 24-hour period for the 5 and 100. Again, in 1992, it was studied by the National Oceanographic, NOAA, NOAA. And then again in 2013, as you can see across the board, those numbers really have not changed very much over time. You have to keep in mind that a couple wet years or 5 wet years over a span of 60 years, those averages still tend to stay fairly similar, but it was nice to see in 2013 that they had restudied it with a lot of the stuff we've had over the last decade, 15 years, and the numbers still show to be fairly consistent. I don't need to read all of this, but this is our design standards for a minor, a 5-year event on local streets, collectors, arterials. Local streets, our flow during a 5-year event can spread to the crown of the street, whereas an arterial, you have to leave 2 10-foot wide lanes for passage on those arterial streets during a minor event. Major events, we allow 18 inches of depth of flow on all streets except arterials over the gutter line, and arterials, we're not allowed to go over 6 inches of depth. Here's a graphic kind of showing that. The top one being a residential street. During a major storm event, the standards allow that street to basically fill to the right-of-way lines on that street during a 100-year event. And then on an arterial street, as you'll see in the minor event, the 2 10-foot lanes clear, and then in a major event, 6 inches is allowed to pond on that arterial street. Best management practices, these are water quality structures that we build either privately in town or the public builds them. Our regional pond system incorporates these in all of our regional ponds. In private development, BMPs are mandatory if the site is more than 2 acres in size and has any impervious area, or if it's between 1 and 2 acres and has more than an acre of impervious area. Also, BMPs may be required if an existing site is being modified and our evaluation shows it's necessary. These are examples when there is not a regional pond serving that area. If there's a regional pond serving the area, they do not need to do the BMP requirements with it. Detention on any site over 5 acres, they're required to detain to the single-family runoff rate for both 5-year and 100-year events, unless the downstream systems are designed for the higher flow. Sites that drain onto undeveloped properties, such as farmland or areas that are owned by a private property owner that does not want to do any development at that time, or whatever the case may be, there are no public systems, drainage systems in place to handle the flows. The sites that drain onto those have to detain their runoff to the pre-developed condition so that that site isn't getting a faster flow than it was when the developing site was undeveloped as well. Sites in a watershed with known drainage concerns where we have identified flooding concerns or areas where our systems cannot accommodate the flows as is, additional detention needs may be required in those. In those areas, we have drainage studies done to confirm that and identify any possible corrections to that. County coordination, this is another thing we get asked on occasionally, and with Minnehaha, we do coordinate with them occasionally, but good for them, bad for us is they drain onto us versus vice versa. So there aren't a lot of issues that we deal with them in the planning stages, that type of thing for drainage. Unlike them, Lincoln County is almost completely downstream of the City of Sioux Falls, and we do have a lot of coordination with them. We've gotten much more coordination over the past 4 or 5 years with them. We've done drainage studies, make sure that they know what we're planning to do in an area, as well as we know what they're planning to do. We recently contributed funds and drainage information from our studies to them to aid in one of their big drainage studies in the Spring Creek area, which, if you're familiar, is kind of that area south on Highway 11 near Schindler. That's a recent drainage study we just performed with, they performed, that we've helped funding and providing data. The next 4 slides are kind of to illustrate how we go through a plan review on our development, where we start on a macro level such as this. This is an elevation heat map where the red areas are the higher ground, and then the yellow is transitioning to lower, and then the green being the lowest. This is the Copper Creek addition out on Highway 11 and 26th Street. As you'll see, the crescent-shaped yellow area in the blue box is our regional pond. That is the lower area amongst all the higher ground. Same box here, this is overlaying our regional BMP, regional pond map that we had created. And as you'll see, the blue area drains to that regional pond, and that development has a ridge line running through it with the yellow area draining to the east and off to a different regional pond. So when we're looking at this, we talk with the developer, explain what is treated by what pond and how they need to design their site to make sure that the flows are meeting those design standards and drainage studies for those areas. Now zooming into the subdivision, we start looking a little more closely at the street layout, the lot layout, how that fits with the regional pond in there, the topography of the land, so that we can start looking at the piping network and how they're going to do the drainage system through there. On this map, the yellow lines are sump pump collection systems we put in the backyard so that people can connect their collection systems. Those drain into the red circles and lines, which is our storm sewer pipes. Those collect the water off the streets to meet the design standards. And in this case, you'll see that those red lines all drain out from those streets into our regional pond where it is detained and then eventually released downstream. Sump pump collection systems, as I said before, they're required since 2005. Developers install them when they develop an area, and they basically put them in and stub out pipes to every lot in the area that does not have a storm sewer system or a detention pond or a channel flowing behind them or adjacent to their lots. We reimburse the developers for the cost of the materials to install these collection systems, and then allow the homeowners to connect to them when they're constructing their home or at a later date. Homeowners must connect to the sump pump collection system if their existing sump pump discharge is creating a nuisance. This is an ordinance we have. This is an example of algae starting to form on a driveway approach where sump pump discharges are flowing across the sidewalk. And then the lower right picture is a picture of our retrofit program, where areas that were built prior to 2005, there were no collection systems. We identify areas where sump pump discharge is a nuisance and causing problems in a neighborhood. And if we can serve it with a collection system retrofit, we go in and directionally drill these pipes in and allow those homeowners to connect. Some of the common concerns that we receive in the drainage department. There are three categories: public, private, and sump pump. Public versus private, this is another question we get quite often, internally and externally. What is public water versus private water? Public water is anything that comes off of a public street right-of-way or from a public drainage system, storm sewer pipes, channels, that type of thing. Private water drains from one parcel of non-city property onto another. A drainage easement is dedicated on any areas where public water is conveyed through private property. Couple examples for you. If water drains from a downspout and runs along the back lot lines down to the low end of a block, that water is all private. If someone blocks the flow of that water, building up their yard, putting a shed in, that type of thing, that is a private issue between the person who did the blocking and the people that are negatively affected by that water, blocking of that water. Now, if someone blocks the flow of public water running through a drainage easement, city personnel will step in and require removal of the blockage. And basically, we go out and check these areas regularly to ensure that those aren't blocked following an event or as we see them in our regular duties. Sump pump hazards. A couple more examples of nuisance. A sump pump hose running across a sidewalk creating a tripping hazard. And one that happens fairly frequently is the buildup of algae either on sidewalks or in the gutter pans. This becomes extremely slippery, and we hear about people falling in these all the time on their bikes or walking. Those are the areas we try and address immediately with either installing a collection system or hopefully, in a lot of cases, there's already a system or a storm sewer adjacent. We can, by ordinance, require that person to connect their pipes to that. Being a good neighbor, last couple slides here. We see things quite often where people do something they think might be great, but this landscaping, in a case like this, if there's a backyard swale draining a bunch of folks' backyards down to the low end of a block, and something like this gets installed, that can block the flow of water passing through there. Another example, a shed getting put up in that backyard swale can cause a blockage or directing that water around to an area that it wasn't intended to flow. And this one I got a laugh out of. This is somebody took their downspouts from their house, extended it all the way across their driveway, and put it right up against the chain link fence of the neighbors. We hope we don't see this kind of thing very often, but being a good neighbor is what we try and preach to people. When there are private drainage issues, we explain it and then hope that they and their neighbors can work it out friendly. I went through that pretty fast, but I wanted to get through a lot of information, and certainly ready for any questions you might have regarding the drainage.
Councilor Urbanbach.
Thanks, Andy. That's great stuff. I'm always interested in the things that we learn on the City Council. A couple of questions. The first one is, what's the main source of revenue for that drainage fee? Who pays it and how often do they pay it? That kind of thing. Where does that come from?
The drainage fee is charged to all platted parcels within the city, with a few exceptions, cemeteries, and then the county, because we use the county to do our billing and collections. We bill it on the property tax statement as a fee at the bottom of that statement. So it's collected in April and October when the property taxes are due. The county collects it and then sends those payments to us.
So we just showed how often I look at my property tax statement, obviously, but good to know we're all making payments on that. Then talk about the thing that came to my mind, and you talked about it a little bit, but can you give us more information about the study that's being done with Lincoln County on the Spring Creek drainage area? What's been our part in that study, and where's it at in the process, and where do you think it's headed?
Our part, the county applied for a grant, and there was I believe, 25% local match, which was about $500,000. And they approached, themselves, the county, City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota DOT, I don't recall, the homeowners in the area, and someone else. There's 5 parties that they asked to contribute $100,000 towards the study. We were one of those contributing partners. And then also we provided drainage study information for the stuff from the city that drained to them, for their engineer to do the model for that entire area. Their modeling identified numerous improvements to the system and detention areas necessary, upsizing of culverts, that type of thing to safely pass the water. And my understanding is they've actually begun construction on some of those improvements. I don't know how many are complete at this point, but they are in the construction phase of that.
If I might, one more, Mr. Chair. Just related to that, do we take that study into account then? I mean, one of the big conversations we have every time we talk about development in the southern part of the city is drainage and where's that water going. Are we taking that study then into account as we do authorize development going south?
Well, what we have is our master plan and the regional basins. Specifically in that area, we have 2, if not 3 regional ponds that are basically in that watershed that drain towards that study area. And those regional ponds, we basically provided the county the proposed design flows that would be coming out of those ponds, and they used that information as inflow into their models. So when we build those, there's 1 or 2 ponds built already, and the others are on the fringes where development is soon to begin. When those are built or after they've been built, we ensure that they're designed per our master plan and that those flows are at or less than the flow that's in the study, so that they don't get a surprise downstream with a higher flow than what was planned.
Good, thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach, as a thought, do you see where this might be a subject that, we talk about the coordinated efforts between our 2 counties and the city government, where maybe we could work? As you're saying, Andy, we talk about, we're going to build these BMPs, and then we're going to drain it into Lincoln County. Well, what are their plans? Are we coordinating our efforts, or our thought processes, our development with them? Is there a process for that right now, other than just to say, hey guys, this is what we're doing, get ready?
Well, we're actually working all the time on improving those processes. We're actually looking at participating in a USGS study right now to better outline the drainage basins and all flow pathways within those basins. Ourselves and the county are both looking at participating in that study, so that we both have the same map in front of us when we're talking about future projects. So we both see exactly where the flows are going. We can have studies done to establish flows, maximum flows for each of those pathways. So we're working towards that. In the meantime, yes, we provide them information as we get it. They take that information and relay that onto their constituents when they're asked about what the Sioux Falls is doing, that type of thing. And they are being much more proactive on drainage like we are. Their engineers are doing studies in like the Schindler area, looking to ensure that the flows are passing safely through their areas.
Okay. Councilor Kiley, then Councilor Staggers.
Andy, on slide 31, you were discussing the sump pump collection systems. And there are cases where the developer is required to install sump pump collecting systems, and the city reimburses them for the materials. So I understand that to mean that the developer is then responsible for the actual installation, the trenching and so forth that is required to install that.
Yes, they do the full installation, they buy it, and then they submit a reimbursement for material to us.
And then the last bullet point, homeowners may connect to the sump pump collection system. Is that may?
Yes, it is not a mandatory connection at construction. That's something that we've had numerous discussions on. Some developers make it mandatory for anyone who builds in their development, but there is no ordinance aside from when you are a nuisance pumper at this time.
I would say in that situation, that's maybe something that we should look at as a council. It seems like we're putting in quite an investment, and then we might not actually see any fulfillment in that investment if people are not actually connecting to the system. And then I do realize that, and I don't mean to say that it should all go at the developer's expense or the contractors. I mean, obviously, that could be considered as a part of your home construction requirement along with everything else that's required. So that would be something that I think this council should look into.
I think that'd be a good topic for our land use committee to go over. I remember it coming up once before, but I think it'd be good to bring it back to land use committee again.
I would agree.
Thank you, Councilor Kiley.
But also at the same time, with new development, this is required. And sometimes you might have a development where really sump pumps are not needed, but despite that fact, we require it. Yeah. We ought to look into that too.
That'd be another good thing to bring to that same meeting, yes. How do we reimburse them, Andy? It says we reimburse them. We reimburse them for supplies, or what? How do we reimburse them?
Sure. We have a form they fill out, and then they provide a table basically showing the material they installed along with the plan sheets, and we verify installation of it in the field. And then we have $300,000 in our CIP program for sump pump collection systems. That cost is shared between the retrofits that we install ourselves and the reimbursements to the systems the developers install. So $300,000 of material and or retrofits are done each year.
So it's not a cost that's passed on to the homeowner?
They pay for it through their drainage fees that are assessed to everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but not from the developer to the homeowner when they purchase their house. I mean, it's not, hey, we had to put this in, so we have to charge you extra for your home construction because...
There is. There is.
It is or is not?
Because there's the labor involved in constructing it.
They bear the expense of installation of it, the labor and the installation costs for it.
Even if they don't hook up to it?
This is for the collection system that runs along the back lot line. If mandatory connections are required, it would be done at the time of the home being built, and that would be a cost the home builder incurred and then would most likely pass on to the buyer.
Councilor Staggers, other questions?
Yes. My understanding is that street sweeping has been reduced. Is that correct or not?
Mark Cotter will answer that one.
This year, Councilor, we are just wrapping up our third round, and so typically for the previous years, we have done 2 rounds, one in the spring, one in the fall, and then concentrated more efforts on street maintenance. Now that we were able to go out to the market and do some of that street maintenance with private contractors, we took those crews and we kept them sweeping all summer. So this is the first year we got back again to 3 times.
And so we're anticipating continuing now with the regular schedule that we
Yes.
had, huh?
Yes.
Okay, great. Also, too, the downspouts. You had a picture of somebody having a downspout going to the fence line there. Is that against city code to have somebody put their water deliberately on somebody else's property like that or not?
I believe it's a private matter between the two neighbors.
Matter, huh?
I believe there are some building codes that deal with downspouts. I don't know that they go to the level of where you point the spout.
Okay.
We don't deal with it in the drainage group or in the design standards.
Okay. And if I could ask just one other question here. You had some pictures of the wetland vegetation and how we're allowing it to grow and be natural and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, we've gotten some complaints from property owners that are nearby saying, this is terrible, the city didn't used to do this, and how would you respond to that?
Well, a lot of that is obviously in the eye of the beholder. We get quite a few calls of people thanking us because they like the view better that way. So we'll never be able to please everyone, obviously. We see a lot of benefits in doing it this way. Some of the issues we had in the past were some areas have mitigated wetlands in them, so we weren't allowed to mow them. And then some areas were too wet to mow, so we were getting a situation where one person next to a drainage property had it mowed all the way down to the water's edge, and another one had no mowing, and there was frustration that why doesn't the city treat every property the same when they're drainage properties? We've had some frustration with the stopping of the mowing, but we feel we're being consistent citywide with it. They are drainage properties, they're not parks, so they're not intended for public access and use. They're intended for being drainage properties and conveying that water and holding that water. So,
yeah, because you had to picture that one house, and just right next to it, you've got that, and we enforce mowing, on private property, and then we have that. People are saying, well, there's inconsistency here on the part of the city.
Yeah, and we have exempted those properties through the Parks Director for the 8-inch mowing height. Per the ordinance, you can exempt properties from that. And we do a significant amount of spraying in these areas so that we try and minimize, that those areas aren't full of thistles and noxious weeds, that they're more natural grasses and that type of thing that aren't as big of a risk of invading into someone's adjacent yard. And mowing that buffer helps with that too. It keeps the weed growth further away.
One man's weed is the next man's flower. Councilor
on this picture, just two small questions. Is there a benefit for leaving those weeds on the far, not weeds, but the taller grasses there for when it's, the water comes through? I mean, is it helpful for the flow of the water as well, or am I not understanding that? Is that part of the, at one point, not from the city, but was told from somebody else it helps with the flow of the water. I don't know if that's true or not.
There's a couple different things with that. Short grass allows for more contact with the soils and the potential for erosion when water's passing through there. The grasses we are trying to grow in these areas and what we seed into newly constructed areas are grasses that have a much deeper root system than a bluegrass would. And that deeper root system does a lot for holding soils in place, absorbing more water down into the soils, pulling pollutants out of the water, those kind of things. So there are definite benefits if you get the right kind of grasses growing in there.
And what happens if this neighbor here wants to trim it down themselves? Can they do that, or is that against?
We don't allow anyone to do that. We certainly have it occur every now and then, but anyone who approaches us and asks if they can do that, we tell them no, because that's a city property. We don't want them damaging their mower or hurting themselves being out on city property doing things like that.
I just was curious if they could make 2 swipes with their lawnmower and call it good or not.
We don't
Sir
permit
Jameson?
that.
First off, Andy, there's a lot of stuff here. I think you do a fine job of trying to manage all this flowing stuff. You've been very responsive to me, and I appreciate that. Couple things. The sump pump collection system, mandatory hookup, I think we've plowed that field before, but I think it is good information to probably have us go through again to understand why it is an option and why it is set up like it is. Second, on the street cleaning, what do you pay or you're charged, assessed a fee somehow for the one time that you pay for it? How much is it?
I don't know the dollar amount. It's, I believe, labor and equipment charges for whatever that takes to complete that first sweep. The first sweep in generally is a little more time intensive because there's a lot more material built up through the winter. I don't know that anybody's got that information tonight, but
That's okay.
we can certainly get it to you, though. Yeah.
Well, the reason for doing it, I think, is clear. The question I was wondering is, recently here in the fall, I had a neighbor who cut his grass and pushed all of his leaves out into the street. Mm-hmm. And all of us cringed and thought, clearly he's not going to leave them. And he did. And so we went along and blew them back into his yard for him. But
I appreciate that.
So my thought is, in some of the other areas in town, though, the leaves are got to be a big problem for you coming into the storm system and clogging and creating flooding. I'm just wondering if there's a trade-off and a value of picking up more leaves more often than cleaning them out of the system. I don't know if you deal with leaves in the system. Is that a problem?
The leaves themselves aren't generally a clogging problem. They are definitely a pollutant problem. When you get high quantities of leaves decaying, it actually is bad for the water quality. That's a nationwide thing that a lot of communities deal with. We certainly don't want to see people blowing them into the streets, because if you do get a high concentration of them, all it takes is a couple smaller twigs or branches that also get in there, and then all the leaves back up against that, and then it is a clogging problem. We don't see a lot of clogging of inlet issues with the leaves, but the water quality portion of it certainly is a concern for us.
Councilor Kiley?
One more if I could.
Okay, one more. Okay,
Sorry.
Councilor Stake.
Not fast enough down here. Go ahead.
One more point on that. The third sweeping, as Chad informed me, basically they start on the outside and work in, so they're pulling as many of those leaves as they can away from the gutter pan rather than shoving them into the gutter pan for the last sweep, so that pulls them away and they're able to get all those collected.
On the spraying, the slide that's up now, you say you use an extra effort in spraying for weeds. I've heard similar complaints about the weeds, and I would only encourage you to use an extra amount, or repeated applications, or better timeliness or something. But I think if you can hold the weeds down, I think from all the complaints that I've seen over the years, we've gone past maybe the mowing effort. Now it's just about weeds, so yeah. That would be my only comment, to add more weed control.
And we are certainly, this is the finishing of our second full year of it. We're still learning some ourselves as far as best times to get in, and whether we can blanket spray them or have to go in and spot spray with backpack spraying. I did want to mention one other thing too. On occasion, if weeds do get out of control in an area, we will go in and mow the entire area down, so we're able to get ahead of the weeds again. It's not consistently done, but on occasion, if a site gets too out of control, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Councilor Kiley.
I guess I'll piggyback off of this last question here. There's nothing preventing the homeowner either from putting in their own landscape barrier to prevent encroachment of weeds. The crabgrasses or the unwanted grasses that they may not want in their lawn. I mean, we did that very thing. Obviously, in a situation like what's up on the screen now, homeowner usually moves into that area knowing that this is going to be developed in this way, so they should be prepared to deal with, I guess, some of the potential consequences. I think myself, the benefits far outweigh any of the negatives in a situation like that. But I'd like to just comment on something that Councilor Staggers had mentioned earlier regarding the requirement of sump pumps and drainage tile by code in areas where it's not needed. Oftentimes, we don't know when they're needed or not. And an example, I had a neighbor across the street that for the first time in 17 years, this past June, his sump pump operated. And the requirement, I'm very much in favor. I'm not opposed to discussing it, but I'm very much in favor of the requirement of the sump pumps and the tiling system in new homes because the cost is minimal in the original installation of the drainage tile and the sump pump compared to replacing one's furniture, carpeting, drywalling, walling materials, and everything else that goes in. So I think it's very, very good insurance, a cheap insurance policy.
All righty. Any other business? All righty then, as I learned last week, we shall convene again at 7 o'clock for our city council meeting. This meeting is adjourned.